Hello, this is Paul Niederer, and I'm here to talk to you about the CCIV and the 5 documents that are important for this corporate collective investment vehicle, Australia's new investment vehicle. If we follow the numbers, we've got document number 1 is the Constitution, number 2, the Compliance Plan, number 3, the Investor Management Agreement, number 4, the PDS Disclosure Document, and number 5, the Share Registry. Now, if we start with the Constitution, this is the primary governing document for the CCIV, and unlike other company types, a CCIV must have a constitution and it can't rely on the replaceable rules set out in the Corporations Act. Now, a wholesale CCIV must have a constitution, but there's no sort of prescribed contents like there is with the retail one. On the other hand, the constitution of a retail one must satisfy the minimum requirements outlined in the Act. Now, this requires provisions to be included for the establishment of sub-funds and the classes of shares referable to such a sub-fund. It must outline the method by which members of the CCIV can make complaints in relation to the CCIV and specify how they're to be dealt with. It also must empower the CCIV to be able to borrow and raise money and include limitations of powers if necessary. And further requirements are to be met if the retail CCIV has redeemable shares or redeemable preference shares. As mentioned, the replaceable rules outlined in the Corporations Act are not applicable to the CCIV. The second document is the Compliance Plan, and a retail CCIV must have a compliance plan and a compliance plan auditor. And this compliance plan must set out the measures the corporate director is to apply in fulfilling its responsibilities in relation to the CCIV to ensure compliance with the Corporations Act and the CCIV's constitution. However, unlike registered schemes, a retail CCIV does not need to have a corporate compliance governance committee, as there is a requirement for the corporate director of the CCIV, which is an entity, to have at least half of its directors as external directors. Now, there's no prescribed content requirements for a CCIV's compliance plan. This is intended to improve the administrative efficiency and the effectiveness of compliance plans through a more flexible and outcomes-focused approach. This means that the compliance plan must be tailored to suit the nature, the scale, the complexity, and the assets of the CCIV. And an adequate compliance plan should include mechanisms and procedures for early identification of potential breaches and for monitoring overall adherence to the compliance plan. The corporate director of a CCIV may amend the CCIV's compliance plan or repeal and replace it. Now, ASIC may also direct the corporate director to modify the CCIV's compliance plan to ensure it complies with the basic content requirement. The third document is the Investor Management Agreement. Now, the investment manager is often the brand name recognized by investors. It's responsible for the marketing of the fund and making the decisions on investment. The corporate director delegates these functions to the investment manager through an investor management agreement. It's usual for the day-to-day investment management of a fund to be delegated by the corporate director to an investment manager. Now, the investment manager may be part of the same group of firms as the corporate director, or the corporate director may appoint a firm that has no other legal relationship with it. The corporate director must ensure that the investment manager invests the funds and assets in line with the objectives, the strategy, and investment principles of the fund and the applicable regulations. ASIC still regard the corporate director rather than the investment manager as the principal person responsible in how the fund is managed. The Investor Management Agreement will also contain provisions to allow the corporate director to replace the investment manager if it considers that it will be in the best interest of the investors. Now, the relationship with the investment manager must be arm's length. It must be independent relationship. Now, usually the investment manager will be the firm that initiates the idea for the fund and will have the investor base and will thus select the corporate director. In this case, the investment manager has the ability to remove the corporate director and request that it transfers the funds to a new corporate director of its choice. This has the potential to create a condition of undue influence over the corporate director by the investment manager. However, the corporate director retains the ultimate responsibility to act in the best interest of investors. The fourth document is the PDS, the Product Disclosure Document. Now, retail clients who acquire a share in a CCIV must be provided with a PDS. The content requirements for the PDS of a CCIV are largely consistent with the requirements for PDSs of registered schemes. A PDS rather than a prospectus must be given to retail clients who acquire a security in a CCIV. Now, limited exceptions apply to the PDS requirements where a retail client is associated with a CCIV or a corporate director or in other circumstances. Additionally, if a retail CCIV intends to engage in cross-investments, its product disclosure statements must include a statement to that effect. And further, if a retail CCIV is required to provide a product disclosure document to a retail client, that PDS may also need to include information about any fees that may be charged to members in respect of any cross-investment activity. The PDS for a CCIV is generally subject to the same content requirements that ordinarily apply to PDSs for other financial products, which you can see in section 1013D of the Act. The final document is the share registry, which isn't really a document, but the list of directors, their ownership and things like that. Now that's usually managed by the corporate director, and the share registry records any changes in share ownership and shareholders, and usually this is managed online. Investments are processed online and funds placed in the CCIV's application account. Once the minimum requirements are received or the requirements in the PDS, the money is transferred to the sub-fund so that operations can commence. So there you go, the 5 documents involved in a CCIV. The Constitution, the Compliance Plan, the Investor Management Agreement, the PDS Disclosure Document, and last of all, the Share Registry. Thank you.